At Redraft in 5, we don't do introductions. Just like Dynasty Trades in 5, we don't want to waste your time. We want to help you win in fantasy football. And we got to talk about this week, Coop. This was a tilting week. We had some really, really strong performances. We had some duds. We had some injuries. We sort of had a full scope. This is going to be a year where we're going to have to grind all year long, look for edges to help us win. Last week and pretty much all summer long, you've been talking about this Clint Kubiak offense, and we saw it. Like, anybody who was sleeping and saying that was just Carolina in week 1 and maybe brushing the performance aside, like, they went into Dallas and smoked them.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Early in the season, you got to care about the usage. You got to care about how these offenses are set up first and foremost. We're not going to chase touchdowns. We're not even honestly going to chase targets in some cases because we need the usage to be there. There are certain guys that get a lot of targets in one game, but if they're only running half the routes, it's not going to happen again, right? So this offense, we put a pin in it because we watched Mike McDaniel take the Kyle Shanahan offense, go to the Dolphins, and implement it. He went and got a left tackle. He went and got a fullback, right? He has 2 elite pass catchers. And because of all the guys that play that don't soak up targets, guys like Alec Ingold and Kyle Juszczyk, guys like Charlie Warner last year or Durham Smythe for the Dolphins, that's what the Saints are doing. You look at the guys out there like Adam Prentice and Foster Moreau that are playing a ton of snaps, but they're not really guys that soak up targets. What happens? All those targets get consolidated among the guys that we like, right? The Chris Olaves, the Rashid Shaheeds, the Alvin Kamaras. That's what we want. We want highly consolidated snaps and targets. And if you look at it, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed both played virtually the entire game. The next closest guy, Mason Tipton and Cedric Wilson, they didn't even play half the game, right? It's 2 wide receivers, a bunch of tight ends, a fullback, and then a superstar running back. It's the perfect setup. It's why we liked Miami. It's why we like 49ers. And it's now why we love the Saints. Simple as that. We were on it from the start, and it panned out the way we hoped.
Yeah, and Coop, one interesting thing, like, all those guys are so consolidated. They're all cooking. This week they have the Philadelphia Eagles coming into New Orleans. It's going to be like all eyes on fantasy football are going to be on this game. And one thing that's interesting is you could even see a little bit more consolidation because now Taysom Hill looks like he's banged up. So that's an exciting thing. And for me, it's every single place you look, people are giving praise to Clint Kubiak. They want to give him head coaching jobs. Basically, like everything we saw from like Bobby Slowick and Ben Johnson and all these guys last year, that's like Clint Kubiak times like 5 right now, and he deserves it. But I got to talk about the Ryan Grubb effect. Ken Walker, week 1 usage was extremely strong. Ken Walker misses this past week. We're not sure how long he's going to miss. But one thing that was super interesting was we had a pretty much an even ball game between Seattle and New England. It was not some weird game script where they were coming from like a deep deficit and having to just turn on the Jets. This was essentially an even ball game. And the Ryan Grubb effect is in full effect right now with no Ken Walker, no bell cow running back who's going to command a ton of carries out of the backfield. And what we saw was Geno Smith had the 2nd most pass attempts that he's ever had in a game. He had the most completions he's ever had in a game, and it produced insane fantasy numbers. DK Metcalf finishes with 10 catches for 129 yards, but the most impressive thing was 14 targets. DK Metcalf, that was the 3rd most targets he's ever had in a game, and this was the 3rd most catches he's ever had in a game. And everybody's like, yo, Debo's an alpha, like whatever. I already knew that. But we also saw the breakout game from Jackson Smith and Jigba, and this was massive. Jackson Smith and Jigba get 16 targets, Coop. We're talking about like a Cooper Kupp-like, Devontae Adams-like target total. He also gives us 12 catches, 117 yards, and that's career highs in targets, career highs in catches. So we're seeing like Ryan Grubb, what he did at the University of Washington in terms of a passing offense that's fantasy friendly, where they're running a lot of plays. And Seattle had a pass attempt 69.8% of the time, nearly 70+%. They were passing yesterday. So this is a super interesting one for me. This is a coordinator that I was super excited about in the preseason. They're not going to go New Orleans on us. But in terms of if I have DK Metcalf, if I have Jackson Smith and Jigba, I'm feeling really excited about things week to week.
Yeah, and we see this from time to time. The flippening is what we like to call it, where you have 2 guys that are playing the full snap shares and a younger guy that's being held back, right? And then at a certain point, there's something that happens. Maybe in this case, Tyler Lockett's dealing with a bit of a knee issue, right, with the patellar tendon, and then the other guy gets more snaps at a certain point and never gives it back. We saw it last year with when Justin Jefferson got hurt with the Vikings. Early in the season, it was Jefferson and KJ Osborne. Jordan Addison was the third fiddle. Then when Jefferson got hurt, Osborne and Addison were both playing the whole game. When Jefferson came back, it wasn't Addison that went back in the bottle. It was KJ Osborne. At a certain point, JSN is just a guy that you can't put back in the bottle, I think. And we might be getting there. We might be getting there already. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. A guy that once happened to way back in the day, Chris Godwin, stuck behind Mike Evans and stuck behind Deshaun Jackson. He finally got, in year 3, his breakout role, and he went crazy. And guess what? This year, he's back in that role. Last year, and I talked about this last week when I said trade for Chris Godwin. I said, this is not 2023 Chris Godwin that's playing outside. He's not going to the slot much. He's dealing with a neck injury and a knee injury. This is new Chris Godwin, who is healthy. He's playing more slot than he is outside, which he only did once last year in a game. This year, 2 weeks in a row, now he's done it. He has Liam Cohen, who coached with the Rams, right? Coached with Cooper Kupp and knows how to take advantage of that slot flanker role, move these guys around and create separation, use motion to your advantage, and get the ball to these guys. And we watched Cooper Kupp last week go out and have 11 receptions on 14 targets out of the slot. And then we just watched Chris Godwin do the same exact thing and go off this week operating in the slot and outside. I mean, it is absolutely wheels up for him. Baker Mayfield looks awesome. So it's great for Mike Evans. And I'll tell you what, if anything happens to Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, got to keep an eyeball on Jalen McMillan too, because he is looking like a pretty decent player. He's behind 2 superstars, right? That's how it works. But keep an eye on him because, I mean, Baker Mayfield, hottest team in football, and he's QB1 right now overall.
Yeah, and my trade recommendation was pretty good too. I said to try to buy Trey McBride, so we ran super pure on that one. But Chris Godwin, I love it, Coop. You've been on him for a while. We talk about the offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak, but there's really good things going on in Tampa Bay right now. That was a game where in previous seasons the Bucs would have lost that game. Rashad White gets banged up. Aiden Hutchinson is continually getting to Baker Mayfield. It was like things didn't go well, but you're able to adjust and able to win against a very, very strong Lions team. Like this Tampa Bay team is for real. And the division where a lot of people sort of brushed it aside, the NFC South, those New Orleans Tampa Bay games are going to be awesome this year if these teams can keep it up. So I love that one. And Godwin, all the wide receiver attrition that we've seen this year, all these guys getting banged up, Godwin's just going to keep climbing up the weekly rankings where you're going to turn around one day and he's going to be like wide receiver 5 on the week. And it's a usage thing. Like we saw it last year. Mike Evans really benefited from being in that offense last year. And now like it's sort of flipped around where Liam Cohen is going Godwin, Dave Canales was going Evans, and it's Baker Mayfield showing his versatility where he's able to elevate Evans last year and then flip it and elevate Godwin this year. And I think that's you talked about Baker Mayfield. We're going to talk about waivers. If you enjoy hearing Coop and I talk about our reactions, make sure you're also tuning into the Waiver Wire show we're dropping right here on Redraft in 5. But last week, you talked about adding Baker Mayfield if he's available in your league. And Baker is just a lot of confidence in Baker right now. Like if you have Baker Mayfield, you've got something right now. So really fun. And for me, it's we told people to chill out. There was all these, let's just call them what they are, like lunatics who wanted to flip Marvin Harrison Jr. after 1 week of struggle, after we crowned him like the greatest wide receiver prospect arguably ever and the highest drafted wide receiver ever in redraft. Harrison Jr. was going at like the 1-2 turn in competitive leagues, early second round getting cleaned up in leagues like the FFPC. And week 1, everybody's just nervous, has this dud of a performance. And it was like a massive weight collectively being taken off of our shoulders. Harrison Jr. not only scoring 2 touchdowns, but the way he scored those 2 touchdowns, Coop. Explosive, big plays. Maserati Marv out there just doing what he did at Ohio State, scoring touchdowns. And he almost had that third one, Coop. And if he had that third touchdown catch, we would have been losing it right now. But it's not just Marvin Harrison Jr. Like Marvin Harrison Jr. showed it. We're back to like Marvin Harrison Jr. is a wide receiver 1 right now, period. But there's another wide receiver. It's Malik Nabers, and Malik Nabers getting 18 targets, catching a touchdown pass, putting up an absurd amount of yards, a certain amount of catches. We haven't seen a New York Giants wide receiver do this in a long time. You have to go back to like Odell Beckham in like 2018 to find these sort of like performances. Malik Nabers looks different. He moves different. This guy is like every bit a threat to like the CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase tier in Dynasty. And I wonder what our friends over at Dynasty Trades in 5 are going to be saying about that. But I would say Malik Nabers is an impossible player to trade for in Dynasty. Maybe in redraft, you're going to find some people that don't trust the Giants offense. This guy, week to week, Coop, you got to be considering he's like a top 8, top 7 wide receiver right now in redraft. In Dynasty, I want to put him like wide receiver 4 in Dynasty. He's disgusting. Your thoughts on Nabers?
Malik Nabers, man, and this is something that you've pointed out in the past in our discussions, is you have to pay attention to anyone that gets 15 plus targets, these big, massive 17, 18 target games, because they don't happen by accident, right? Every once in a while, you can have a guy go out and get 10, 11, 12 targets, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't translate, but guys do not go out and get 18 targets. Josh Reynolds might get 8 or 9 targets in a game. He's not going out and getting 17 targets, right? So the moment you see somebody, especially one of these young cats, go out and drop a target game like this, and it's not even a game where everybody was getting peppered either. Sometimes you get those games where it's like, wow, you know, this guy had 18 targets, but Darius Slayton had 12. They just threw 65 times. Not even close. The next closest guy had 4. Right. So it's like this guy was just the alpha dog, that much better than everyone else. And you have to take notice because that is something special. When you get that, that means you got to put that guy on a pedestal because it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen unless that guy is special.
Yeah, and Coop, we talked about this summer, like, and people sort of brush this aside. They're like, yo, they're completely different situations, completely different quarterbacks. But the last time we saw Brian Dable get an alpha wide receiver in an offseason move, it was not through the draft. It was through a trade. Stephon Diggs goes from Minnesota to Buffalo, and Stephon Diggs adds like 60 targets to his previous season total. Like, we're not out of the question here that Malik Nabers is going to exceed what Puka Nacua saw last year in terms of a target total. Like, we could be looking at 160 targets. And people also talk about like Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has never targeted a player like this in a particular week in his entire career in New York. And it's not just personnel. This is what the play calling is this year. It's funneling everything to Malik Nabers. Just like we saw with Cooper Kupp in week 1, we're going to get the ball in Malik Nabers' hands for better or for worse. He takes pressure off of Daniel Jones because he puts so much pressure on that defense. Jones is not doing anything for us in fantasy. Don't get it twisted. This is only Malik Nabers' conversation, but just because the offense is not a strong one doesn't mean Malik Nabers is not going to cook this year if he's seeing this sort of volume with this level of explosiveness. Coop, we got to talk about, like, we cooked it last week on our trades. Just like Dynasty Trades in 5, we're talking redraft trades. We're giving you players that you should trade for right now. Last week, Coop gave you Chris Godwin. I gave you Trey McBride. We went 2 for 2 there, Coop. Let's talk about a player that you want to be trading for across as many leagues as possible this week.
Yeah, I mean, the cat's out of the bag on a lot of guys we've been talking about. Like, you can't go get Kamara. You can't go get Godwin. You can't go get Rashid Shaheed. I think you still can go get Brock Bowers. And a big part of that, why we think you can still get him and why we think his upside hasn't even fully hit yet, is that he got 9 targets this week, and he did so without even playing a full snap share. Like, he's basically playing wide receiver for this team, but he's still kind of, they haven't quite acknowledged that he's just flat out better than Jacoby Myers, even though it's true. And I think what we're going to see is it's going to be Devontae Adams is obviously the star, and Brock Bowers is the second best wide receiver on the team. And then after that, they decide how many snaps Jacoby Myers or Michael Mayer or these guys get. But it goes through these 2 guys. And that hasn't even quite started yet. That's the craziest thing. This is the best pass-catching tight end prospect that we've ever seen. He won the John Mackey Award twice. He's come out in his first 2 games now, getting 8 and 9 targets. If you can get him, you need to go out and get him right now because I think people are still scared that he's a rookie. They're still scared that Devontae Adams is on the team, despite the fact that the number 1 tight end season of all time by Rob Gronkowski had another player on the team get 173 targets, right? So it doesn't even quite matter that he has another target hog on the team. They're still scared of all these things. They're scared of Gardner Minshew, even though Gardner Minshew right now has the second most passing yards in the league and also the second highest completion percentage, right? Like, Gardner Minshew is not playing terrible. If he had 3 touchdowns instead of 2 in any of these games, people would be a lot more excited about Gardner Minshew. So I look at it now and say this is probably your last chance to get on this train before it absolutely steamrolls out of the station all the way to finish as tight end 1 or tight end 2 or tight end 3 this year in fantasy football. And in Dynasty as well, he's probably by a lot of people already ranked as the tight end 1 overall. I know I'm pretty much there. So
he's there. Yeah, he's absolutely there for Dynasty. And I'll say that you need to take advantage of people that have redraft take lock, Coop.
Right.
Because when you talk about where Brock Bowers was selected, you're talking about around players like right after the David Njoku, Jake Ferguson, like somewhere right in that tier is where Brock Bowers was selected, where he really should have been selected alongside like Trey McBride, because that's where we're at. And I don't think he'll catch McBride. McBride's my pick to finish as tight end 1 overall right now. But like, if you this is a perfectly reasonable pivot. Dalton Kincaid to get Brock Bowers, I'm there. Travis Kelce to get Brock Bowers in redraft, I'm actually there, Coop.
Close.
Yeah. So like the end of the day, that's what you're gonna have to give up. But I'll give you the other scenario, Coop, that we don't have with a lot of these other players is the Raiders are about to go 2-1. So this could be a poor argument. And if Raiders are if they're challenging for an AFC playoff berth, I think the Devontae Adams trade goes out the window. But if things start to tail off, they can't run the ball at all. It literally can't run the ball. It's a pass offense with Gardner Minshew, Devontae Adams, Brock Bowers, a little bit of Jacoby Myers. But if they can't run the ball at all, they lose a couple games in a row. They trade Devontae Adams by the trade deadline. Brock Bowers with no Devontae Adams there. I mean, you're talking about like how Evan Engram was used to end last season in terms of that target.
It's Darren Waller all over again. Where you got one guy and you say, okay, if we're going to try and win, this guy's got to catch 15 passes.
And I love it. I love your suggestion for Bowers. Absolutely go get him. If you're in a dynasty league and you can get him, go get him. If you're in a redraft league and you can get him, go get him. Go get yourself a Brock Bowers jersey. Do whatever you can about a bobblehead doll, because this guy's going to be feeding families with the amount of fantasy points he's going to score for years. And for me, this one's a little like, this is a high profile player in a offense where Coop talked about Clint Kubiak, the Clint Kubiak effect. We saw it yesterday, Alvin Kamara just crushing. We've seen it for 2 straight weeks with Rashid Shaheed just cooking people on deep touchdowns. But what we haven't seen is we haven't seen a spike week from Chris Olave yet. But at the end of the day, Chris Olave was the highest drafted Saint, and he hasn't really done it yet with a smash game. Like we saw this weekend, all the usage we want to see for an offense that's scoring points, getting in the red zone pretty much every time they have the ball. Chris Olave is still the number 1 target in this offense, and he got a 37% target share in the New Orleans win over Dallas. Like Chris Olave getting a 30% target share, even in games where Kamara is effectively running the ball and their overall passing volume is not super high, Olave is going to start smashing. There's also going to be a game where defenses are going to start trying to take away the long Rashid Shaheed touchdown. They have to, Coop, at this point. So you're going to see opportunities for Chris Olave to have multiple weeks where I think he's going to put up like 20 PPR points. And you're going to see Chris Olave with more red zone usage than we're used to seeing him in previous years, because we have a functional offense with a genius offensive coordinator. So I'm looking to kick the tires on Chris Olave. You're going to have a couple of Chris Olave managers who are a little bit frustrated seeing Rashid Shaheed just cook and Olave not giving him this sort of production, where I think it's going to balance out. And at the end of the day, Rashid Shaheed, you were absolutely right on that one, Coop. He's going to be a absolute steal in redraft. But at the end of the day, I think Chris Olave is going to outscore him. So I'm looking to get what I think is the best piece of that passing game in New Orleans, while he has sort of a not bad week 2, but not a smash week 2. Where are you at on Olave?
I'll tell you, here's what's happening right now is that you think about these offenses, the ones I described, right? It's not just, Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey that we like. Basically right now, you're getting a chance to buy Brandon Ayuk, or honestly, Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle here, before people realize that it is just the highly consolidated 3 players, right? Like that's the situation. And you get to do it after a week where they only drop back to pass 18 times. Some of these teams drop back legit 50, 60 times this week. This team only dropped back 18. And just like we saw with week 1, right? The week 1, your example with the Shaheed part, how people are going to try and stop taking away. Week 1, we watched the Chiefs said, we're not going to lose to Mark Andrews. We're going to take Mark Andrews away. And what happened? The Chiefs came within a toe of using Isaiah Likely to win. And then moving forward now, teams have to respect Isaiah Likely. They have to respect these other weapons. That's what's going to happen here with the Saints. Rashid Shaheed keeps scoring a touchdown every week. Teams are going to say, we have to stop this from happening, and we have to stop Alvin Kamara from doing this. And now it's not just double teaming Chris Olave the whole time. Like their teams are double teaming him, they're bracketing him, they're taking away. And what's happening is they're getting their butt whooped because they're not playing it straight. Teams are going to have to play this team straight, and Chris Olave has got big weeks to come. I'll tell you that.
100%. Now, last week, Coop, we gave you 2 for 2 on the trades. We gave you 1 out of 2 on the hammers. We're going to talk. We're trying to go 2 for 2 every week on every little thing. So last week we gave you Amon-Ra St. Brown and we gave you Jamar Chase. Amon-Ra ends up crushing. Jamar Chase, underwhelming week. But I'll say one positive with Jamar Chase, we saw him on the field like 93% of the time. So the weeks are coming for Chase. But let's talk about your hammer of the week this week, Coop. What's one guy that fantasy managers can rely on?
We're going back to the well. We're going back to the well with Jamar Chase, dude. We got to. And the thing is, you know what? If it turns out that Joe Burrow's wrist coming off surgery isn't quite up to speed, then it is what it is, right? It's like you have to deal with that. Guys come off ACLs, they come off major surgeries, they're not ready right away. But this is the week, right, for Jamar Chase. We just talked about Malik Nabers, how he got 18 targets against this Commander secondary that is dog water. They do not have any safety or corner that can step up and stop these guys. I mean, like, they rotated guys around on Malik Nabers. They don't have a guy on the roster. They have no one that can stop Jamar Chase. They don't have a Christian Gonzalez. They don't have a Trent McDuffie. Those are the guys that Jamar Chase has faced so far. This team has nothing close to that. And this is the week where Jamar Chase gets right. That's my hammer. We're going back to it. If we go over 2, it is what it is. But we don't shy away from superstars just because they have a couple down games. I mean, people learned it with Marvin Harrison Jr., and they're going to learn it this week with Jamar Chase.
100%. I mean, and also we have this is the defense that we want to be targeting if we're looking to stream quarterbacks, stream receivers for that matter. There's been like 14 out of 15 weeks where the Washington Commanders have allowed a near wide receiver 1 week, if not a wide receiver 1 week. And there was another week in that mix where Darren Waller had like his best game of the season last year against this Washington Commanders team. So it's an easy one. It's also primetime, Coop. Cincinnati, were they robbed against Kansas City? Did they get a little help from the refs in that? Did they get a little hurt from the refs? I don't know. But at the end of the day, that was a game they could have won. I think that they like peel their ears back and just go at the Commanders and put up an absolute number. We saw what Tampa Bay was able to do in week 1. I think we're going to see that here. Maybe get Chase Brown on the field a little bit. 20% of the time he played. Maybe adjust that next week. I mean, I don't know. Just my idea. Stick with us here at Redraft in 5. If you enjoyed this video and you want to get Dynasty content, check out Dynasty Trades in 5. Separate channel than us, but we work with Dynasty Trades in 5 as well. A big shout out to Clay and Scott and Shane over there crushing it. And we hope we get that sort of momentum this year. If you enjoy this video, give it a like and stick with us. We're going to drop a waivers video. It's going to be available right here on Redraft in 5 very soon.